Now welcome to another edition of Battle of the Heroes and Villains, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll for Wedge Antilles. We'll then compare those results to all the other characters we've done thus far, before I then read and respond to some of your comments. But before any and all that, you can already head down to nominate and or vote for which character we do next. Just respond to my pinned comment below with a character name, or vote with a thumbs up if the one you'd like to see is already listed. Whatever single comment gets the most votes in the next 24 hours or so will be the winner and the character we do next. Alright, and now on to the poll for Wedge Antilles, where we'll see that 17% of voters gave him an A, 43% went with a B, 32% thought he belonged in the C tier, which left 5% to give him a D, and a final 3% to give him an F. And so when we do all the math here and consider A a score of 5 and F a score of 1, that means Wedge ends up with an average score of 3.66, which puts him into 48th place overall, and right behind Sabine Wren and Savage Opress, among others, which is going to be a very disappointing finish for a lot of people who really know this character and who love him from beyond the movies, which a lot of people don't know him from, which is, of course, why he finished here in 48th, and not much higher. It's another one of those cases where this is a character where a lot of people are going to love because they know him really well, and a lot of people are going to think, well, he's just kind of there. And so here we end up with him in 48th place. And to start to really dig into this character, let's move to the comments, but not before, once again, just saying thank you to everyone who votes, comments, and watches these videos, or any of my videos. Also, once again, a big thank you to everyone who supports this channel over on Patreon. It is much appreciated. And so now let's kick it off, as we always do, with the top-rated comment, which this time comes to us from Blue Diamond Director, who said, "I will say this, when you just look at the movies, Wedge is just a little side note character, a minor rebel character who survives all three movies and even gets a hug from Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi, one of the best additions of the special edition. But outside of that, nothing special. However, for someone like me who as a kid played the Rogue Squadron games and read the X-Wing novels, my favorite EU series, he is so much more. He is one of the greatest non-Jedi pilots in the galaxy. He's a great ally to our heroes, a great commander to his fellow pilots, and he was a good friend. It was great seeing how much love this character got in the expanded universe, in books, comics, and of course video games. We got to see him take command of Rogue Squadron and rebuild it, fall in love and marry Lala, and survive all the wars the galaxy would face post-Endor. It's awesome that his actor Dennis Lawson is the uncle of Ewan McGregor too. And finally, I'm glad the Disney canon left him alone for the most part, didn't make him a loser like certain other characters. His brief cameo in the Rise of Skywalker got a genuine smile for me. Though I wish he had been flying an X-Wing in that scene, at least they didn't kill him off. C if you look only at his movie appearances, but a definite A when you look at all of the material that covers one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars. And this is one of those comments where when I'm reading it, I'm just kind of nodding my head and thinking, yep, this sums up the character perfectly, and it's going to leave me with nothing to say. So I'll just sort of reiterate what he says here, that it depends on how much you know Wedge and where you know him from. If you grew up reading the books and playing the games and reading the comics, of course you are going to absolutely love this character. He is handled beautifully in the expanded universe. He is fleshed out better than most characters are in the expanded universe. He becomes a true legend. And so if you don't know any of his stories, go back and read the X-Wing novels. Go back and play the games. Go back and read the comics. It is worth your time to really get to know this character. Okay, so now let's move on to a few other comments, starting with this one from Calvin Matthews, who said, "I adore how they made a minor character so iconic in the fan base, whereas any other franchise would have killed him in the last film. Wedge represents how the everyday rebel can be resourceful and competent. B+ for me." Then there's also this one from Living Joke, who said, "He's a regular human being without any Force abilities, doing his best to support the Rebel Alliance. He was loyal to Luke and showed no fear to the Empire. Definitely an interesting and memorable character." And then this comment from Sean Murphy, who said, "I love him in the movies. He is the embodiment of the rebel fighter, the ordinary man standing up against tyranny. He provides a constant link to the rebellion throughout the trilogy and helps keep the narrative grounded. I could not care less how they shoehorn him into the adventures in the EU. To me, he is a combat fighter pilot, pure and simple." And also then this one from Matthew Fox, who said, "The votes on this really surprised me. Being the only pilot that fought in all three major battles in the OT adds amazing depth to the storytelling, and his continued character development in the extended universe is epic. You add the fact that Dennis Lawson is Ewan McGregor's uncle, and it's an easy A. And though yes, in the films we could call Wedge a quote-unquote background character, we don't know anything about him other than he keeps showing up to every major rebellion battle in the films, which is kind of the cool part about him, right? That he keeps showing up, he keeps surviving, he keeps doing his part, and yet he feels like a little more than just your average, everyday kind of guy. He feels like a normal dude, if you will, and yet here he is with the likes of Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Leia, all these other heroes, but he keeps doing his part, and you can kind of connect to that, right? You can feel like, well, you know, maybe I could have been a part of the rebellion too. I could have flown with Luke Skywalker. I could have got a hug at the end of Return of the Jedi after the victory against the second Death Star. Okay, and next up here we have this comment from Lopsided, who said, he wasn't a relevant character in the canon storyline, but in Legends his character and personality was fleshed out throughout the books very well, and had become a well-known character rather than the guy who helped Luke at the first Death Star. I wish we could have seen him more in the sequel trilogy, but overall I think he is a B-tier character. And I was actually pretty surprised and excited to hear that Dennis Lawson, who of course plays Wedge, was coming back to be in the Rise of Skywalker. Sometime before The Force Awakens came out, he was asked if he was going to be in the new film and said that they had asked him, Lucasfilm had asked him, but he turned it down because he thought it would bore him. And I'm assuming they only offered him like a tiny little bit role to just show up. And ironically enough, that's kind of what his appearance in The Rise of Skywalker was. He's in there for all of, 5 seconds. He's the one who was in the gunner chair in the Millennium Falcon. A lot of people thought it was Anthony Daniels outside of the 3PO suit, but it's actually supposed to be, or it is Wedge. And I'm not sure why they don't have him in his own X-Wing. I don't know why they couldn't do just a little bit more with the character in this film. And granted, there is enough packed into The Rise of Skywalker, and they didn't need to try to make it the Rise of Wedge Antilles. But I think you could have at least put him in an X-Wing, his own X-Wing, given him a couple lines in the battle. Instead, he, again, has like one line and does virtually nothing. He's just literally there, and not there in the way he was in the first 3 films or the original trilogy, where he actually feels like he contributes to the battle. Here, he just felt like he was there. Alright, and our next comment here then comes to us from Gubblefish, I think, who said, he was present in the films, but we didn't really get to know him there. I enjoyed how Rebels told his backstory of deserting from an Imperial Flight Academy, but that's pretty much it for now. Maybe we will see more of him in Rogue Squadron if it ever comes out, that is. And it's kind of strange to me that you would do a Rogue Squadron movie without it being about Wedge, or at least including him to a large degree. And granted, we don't know much about what the movie is supposed to be or might end up being if it ever does come out. There wasn't much details given other than the release date, which has now been pushed back indefinitely, so who knows what's going on with it. Either way, the name Rogue Squadron doesn't mean a whole lot to you if you've only seen the movies. You probably, of course, recognize it from The Empire Strikes Back, and that is Luke's squadron, and you probably, or maybe remember Wedge being a part of that squad as well. But beyond that, if you don't know the expanded universe, if you don't know the games and all of that, the name really doesn't mean anything to you, which makes it odd that you would call this movie Rogue Squadron and then not include the character everybody who loves the expanded universe would want to see. And my only guess is they're calling it Rogue Squadron because they want to kind of capitalize off the success of Rogue One. And granted, Rogue Squadron is named after that team, so it does make sense. But again, to not include Wedge in a movie called Rogue Squadron feels like a really kind of insulting thing. It feels like, once again, they are ignoring the expanded universe fans and just throwing them a bone every once in a while. Anyway, I did enjoy seeing Wedge in Rebels. It was a nice little backstory to give him in the new canon. And he's actually in the new canon quite a bit. He is one of the main characters of the Aftermath trilogy, which is not the most beloved trilogy of books in the Star Wars franchise. He is also in Resistance Reborn, which is the book that takes place between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. And it basically explains that his kind of stepson, Snap Wexley, brings him into the Resistance and why he is in The Rise of Skywalker. And when you read that before seeing that film, you kind of hope, again, maybe a little sort of story for Wedge, but not to be. Which is one of the reasons why I've been kind of disappointed with the books. They don't really mean much. You kind of read them and then watch the film, and it doesn't really amount to much. The only exception to that, as I've talked about before, is the book Catalyst is a pretty good prequel to Rogue One. Alright, and enough of me rambling for now, let's get to a few final comments before wrapping it up. Starting with this one from Daniel Sample, who said, "I've been looking forward to this. While Biggs was the more charismatic and arguably memorable, I always saw Wedge as the definitive rebel pilot, not only in his skill but also in his demeanor. He isn't over the top, very stoic and collected and ready to fight for what he believes in. He was an unsung hero in the franchise. I just wish they gave him a medal on Yavin as well." Then there's this comment from CD Freedom, who said, "He's a character that just kinda is there in the movies, but the books, primarily the X-Wing series, gives him so much more development. The Rogue Squadron novel alone lets us see how the events of Yavin took a toll on him, and how he feels when training the squadron's new pilots. A." We also then have this one from Alex Summers, who says, "First, if you haven't read the X-Wing books from the EU, I suggest you read them because not only are they great, but they do give a backstory for Wedge and several other characters. One of my favorites being a new character named Corran Horn, who actually becomes a Jedi and a part of Luke's new order on Yavin. Wedge is a loyal friend, a great pilot, and a great commander to Rogue Squadron. A+. Moving on to this comment from I Like That Hat, who said, "He was instrumental in taking down both Death Stars. He might not have the kill shot, but he was critical in the setup. He gets an A from me." We also then have this comment from On the Other Hand, who said, "As someone who hasn't done much beyond the movies, I think Wedge did a great job of grounding Luke and the rebellion for me. He wasn't presented as one of the main heroes, but he was a normal guy who was a friend and added to the illusion of the iceberg under the story. From what you cover on this channel, the lore is obviously there, but I don't know as a young fan. And that is especially needed for those of us who didn't do a deep dive into the lore and stories. He was one of those little touches that make the story more three-dimensional and believable. Solid B." And finally here we have this comment from Matthew Chai, who said, "He's a pretty minor but memorable side character. If I recall, he appears in every single OT movie, even in the Battle of Hoth, where he somehow survives having his speeder shot down. But then again, he survived Vader's attack in the Death Star Trench, so he must just be super lucky. I think it's cool by the Battle of Endor he became the leader of Red Squadron, showing that he developed a lot as a pilot during that trilogy. I remember I was a bit disappointed that he didn't make a cameo when The Force Awakens first released, but now I am so relieved they didn't add in another OT character to butcher beyond recognition. I give him a B tier for just being able to survive Vader. That's pretty Chad for a minor character." And then there's an edit saying, "Okay, so apparently Wedge appears in the final CGI fest in The Rise of Skywalker, so that sucks." Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about the character Wedge Antilles. Would you like to see more of him in the new canon, or are you happy that he has a great story in the expanded universe? Either way, let me know in the comments below what you think, or what you think of what I or anyone else had to say in this video about the character. So leave that comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.